This is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from the beautiful multiverse, and more particularly from beautiful Danville, Illinois, homeland of the Corellian tradition. And this is Midday with Reverend Don. Welcome. And as you know, if you follow Midday with Reverend Don, you can type your questions or comments into whatever platform you're watching on, and they should appear here in my chat room, and we can talk directly. And today, my subject is ritual. And I came to this subject because last night was our online Samhain and Beltane ritual. And I thought it was one of the better ones we've done. I've been doing these online rituals for a number of years now. And the last many have been quite good. And I think I've been saying this each time, but this was the best one we've done. And that's a very nice feeling to have. Before I was doing online video rituals, I was doing online audio rituals and radio audio rituals going back many years. And in an earlier group of broadcasts, I had talked about the particular requirements of public ritual versus private ritual for yourself or a small group. And when you're doing public ritual, particularly the sort where anyone may come, there are very particular things you have to be concerned about. Or even when you know who's coming, it's not quite the same as a ritual that you're doing only for the energetic purposes of the ritual. There's also a strong social purpose, and that's very true of this kind of ritual also. When you're doing what's basically a performance ritual, that certainly people will join in and will have the energetic advantages of, it's still important to remember that when you're broadcasting it, it has a performance element. And this is something that brings with it a number of challenges. And there were some interesting comments on the ritual last night, including a comment by a viewer that it was visually exciting, I think it was, visually interesting. And that's one of the things that you hope for when you're doing a broadcast ritual. It's also something you hope for with any public ritual. And when you're doing a ritual that isn't only about personal development or group development, but is also about the social effect, you do want to be concerned with how people react to it, how it affects them visually, how it affects them energetically, and how it affects them emotionally. All of these things are very important. When I started doing online video rituals, I found that they could be rather bulky. And this was because people didn't have experience in this format. It took a while to really get used to it. But, this is going to be true of everything. Years ago, I remember a situation where we had a ritual at one of our illustrations, part of our scheduled rituals, I believe, but as was my custom, I asked people to take parts right at that moment. And I asked one of our leading high priestesses to do the blessing of the salt and the water, a very simple part of the ritual, which any of our clergy would know. And I knew this person knew it. I had seen them do it. And yet, on that particular occasion, she was totally blocked. She had a great deal of difficulty getting in the place to do that. And I realized later it was basically stage fright. The fact that it had come up so suddenly had caught her by surprise. And, this is one of the things you have to consider when you're doing any kind of ritual where there's not a lot of practice beforehand, that bringing someone into a role may be somewhat overpowering to them if they are not accustomed to doing it with this audience and not expecting it at that moment. And what do you do about that? Well, you do exactly that. You go ahead and put them in that role because one has to learn how to deal with the unexpected, how to step in on a moment's notice if one wants to be good at this. And I find that with our online rituals, it's not quite the same thing because, everyone, they're scripted rituals because of the nature of how they're being done. And everybody has the script beforehand, so it's not a total surprise to anyone. But doing it for the camera, knowing there are people watching, knowing there are people responding, is still a challenge of its own right. This is true also for public rituals where the people taking part may not be accustomed to what is in effect an audience. If all you've ever done are rituals for yourself or for a small group of friends, doing something more public is challenging. And how do you deal with that challenge? Well, you keep on doing it and you learn how to do it and it becomes easy. And that brings me back to where I started, that last night was a wonderful ritual, one of the best we've ever done, because we've been working together, we have dealt with those challenges, we have overcome them. And I don't believe there was a single skipping of a beat during that ritual. And that to me is a very good ritual. What makes that important? Well, you don't lose your energy that way. One of the things that can happen in a ritual that can be very destructive to the ritual is to become distracted energetically during it, to lose the energy, to lose the momentum of the ritual. And that will tend to cause everyone involved to lose their momentum, to lose the energetic effect of the ritual. It's very hard to get that back. Possible. And one of the keys to working with public ritual is also knowing how to get that back if you do lose it. And we'll come back to that in a moment, but it's so much better not to lose it in the first place. And how do you do that? One of the biggest things is practice of what you're doing, so that nobody does have a moment of blundering over their part or what have you. And during my lifetime, I've done so many rituals that at this point I couldn't begin to count them. And back in Chicago, when I was doing Holy City Temple on a regular basis, we would do 65 or more rituals per year. When you do that, you become very good at ritual. And you become good at it because you keep repeating it. And of course, you don't repeat it exactly. You want to have variety in your rituals. You want to have exploration of new things, but the act of continually practicing ritual is the biggest thing that's going to make you good at it. And so my recommendation to those who want to learn how to be ritual leaders is do lots of ritual. Do it for yourself, do it for others. And if you're looking to do online types of rituals, this is still the best advice. Now, there's a big difference between a broadcast online ritual using the Brady Bunch format, where you have lots of little blocks with people in them, versus doing a live in-person ritual. And the biggest difference is choreography or blocking. There are all kinds of things that you do in that real-time ritual that you really don't want to do in a broadcast ritual. An example is in calling the quarters in a real-time circle, there's a lot of movement involved in that. As a general rule, you face the quarter each time. You move around the circle in a very visual sort of way, and this is important in real-time ritual But it can be very distracting in a telecast ritual, which I tend to think of more akin to a visualized or astral ritual. And hello to Steve Taylor in the chat room. It's good to see you. I was wondering if anyone was going to comment today. When you do an astral ritual, your body isn't moving anywhere. Now, within your astral self, you may be moving all over the place, but physically, you're sitting or lying as you are. When you do a ritual through visualization, you're not moving around. And to me, a broadcast ritual is rather like that. The movement is going on inside, and you want to stay focused for the people who are enjoying the broadcast. Now, that depends on the nature of the ritual, and for me, that is true particularly with the Brady Bunch format. And a lot of broadcast rituals use that format. And Steve says, thanks, I'm so glad to be here to take this in. Thank you, Steve. When you use that format, I think it's most preferable, not necessary, but preferable, to stay focused in your little box for the ease of the people who are taking part virtually. Not everyone chooses to do it that way, and there's nothing wrong with doing it in other ways. Now, if you're doing a broadcast ritual involving many people in one place, it's an entirely different thing. And in that case, I think that you would follow the normal rules of a ritual. But this is something that is a consideration that might not occur to you, that the aesthetics of the nature of your broadcast are going to affect the energetic experience of the people who are watching it. And you want to take that in mind when you're putting it together. And having a strong visual effect is part of every ritual, really. I mean, that's why we put together, in so many cases, very elaborate or beautiful altars. Yes, to some extent, the items on that altar are bringing their energy to the working. They have their own purposes, but often they're also there to be decorative and to put us in the right mind for what we're doing. I have been to rituals where the entire room is decorated for the ritual, for this purpose, to add to that feeling that you have entered a different space, to add to that feeling of being in a magical mindset, to surround you with beauty and imagery that increases your experience, and it does. You can have a good ritual with literally nothing but yourself. But when you're doing particularly a group ritual, having that visual aspect and having a more complex undertaking adds to everyone's experience and makes it more of an experience, which can be very beneficial. One of the things about group ritual, depending, of course, on the group, is that not everyone's going to be in the same skill level. I used to encounter this frequently with guided meditations at other people's events. I have been doing meditation since I was very young. And I remember when I started, there were visualizations, there were specifically exercises that you'll find in my writings, because I used the same exercises I was trained with, at least in the first degree lessons. And I can remember those taking as long as half an hour to get through. But after doing them for a long period of time, they take a few seconds to run through. The speed builds with time. So when I found myself in guided visualizations that were going at a slow, steady pace and would take maybe 3 minutes to get through, maybe 5 minutes to get through, I could not slow myself down for that. I would be off somewhere totally different from where they were trying to take me. This was something I paid strong attention to. And if you do ritual with me, you'll notice I don't usually leave a large period of time. I try to leave enough, but not too much, because I think that I know for myself those long periods of meditation and also long periods of other things, um, which we'll come back to in a moment, would cost me um, the energetic effect of the ritual. By the time we came back out of it, the energy would be gone for me. Another thing, it's not uncommon in ritual to pass things around the circle. There are all kinds of things you might pass around the circle. Um, and the most obvious would be the so-called cakes and ale for the toast. But they're different because they usually follow the active power. So if they take a little while, it doesn't matter so much because you've done your work at that point. But, I've been in ceremonies where you're putting together a little spell of some sort, and maybe you need, well, I'll give a specific example. I remember a spell that involved seeds, and there were a number of seeds you could choose from, and you put them in your little mixture, in your little mojo bag, and the person working this ritual, the person facilitating this ritual, had four high priestesses who were in the circle, passing out these seeds, starting from the same place and going around the circle. Unfortunately, there were 50 people in this circle. This was a disaster. The seeds had not gotten halfway around that circle before everyone had lost their focus. And the priestesses who were distributing the seeds decided to take it upon themselves to change how they were doing this and speed it up because they saw what was happening. It's a disaster to do something like that in a large ritual. You have to keep the focus and you have to keep the energy moving. And if you do something that's going to slow everything down and have nothing happening for a lengthy period of time, you're destroying your ritual. You're destroying its effect. You have to keep the pace going. You have to keep people's attention while you're doing it. And that is how you build the power in the ritual. If it's just you, well, if you lose your focus, you lose the momentum, you can rebuild it. If it's a small group of people, there are ways to do that too without too great a damage. But if you've got a large group, it's much harder. You can, of course, rebuild that focus, but you've got to really kind of take command of that situation and rebuild it. It's so much better if you just hold it in the first place. So when you're putting together a ritual that's intended for a numerous, a large number of people, you want to bear this in mind. You have to bear in mind the logistics of your circle. If you're doing a ritual for a public event, you want to bear in mind that people may not be accustomed to ritual. There may be people who have never been to one before. And so you may want to explain circle etiquette at the beginning of your ritual so that they know. Don't assume that they know. And, if you don't do that and someone unexpectedly leaves the circle, don't be upset about that because you have to assume they didn't know. And you just take the necessary energetic actions to keep your energy moving. These are some of the things to consider with rituals of this sort. Now, of course, in an online ritual, nobody is going to leave the circle in a physical way as a rule, though I've been in online rituals where someone lost their connection in the middle, sometimes someone with an important part in the ritual, and someone else had to step in that moment and take the part. And you have to be prepared for that. But, sometimes you have to be prepared for that in any ritual. Sometimes you will find that for one reason or another, someone who is meant to do something for some reason cannot do it. And particularly as the ritual facilitator, you must be prepared to step in and do it. And if you're in a really good situation, you'll have several people who can be equally able to do that. I have found with the online rituals that we do that it's not at all uncommon that one of the ritualists, because it usually involves 5 to 10 people, at least one of them will not be able to make it at the last moment. Or one of them may have connection problems at the last moment, and occasionally it's even been me. And to go from that and still have an effective ritual, people have to be able to step in. And I've even had that happen in real-time rituals, where perhaps someone, for whatever reason, they miss their cue, they don't realize they need to step forward and do their part. And sometimes you have to either find a way to encourage them to do that, or step in and do it for them, depending on the circumstances. And there are a lot of things that can cause that, including stage fright, being overwhelmed by energy, or being so moved by the ritual that they're simply not able to take the part at that moment. That also happens. The whole point of doing ritual is to be moved energetically, to be moved emotionally. And sometimes in a group, that may be overwhelming to one or more people. And you have to be prepared for what do you do if that happens. And how do you learn to do that? Well, there are a couple of ways. There are certainly wonderful books on it. I recommend my own, Ritual in Theory and Practice, which talks about things like this, but also just the fact of having done it. The more you do it, the better you get. The more you learn how to handle situations. What do you do if someone calls or thanks the wrong quarter? Anyone who's been in any number of rituals knows that eventually that's going to happen. There are a couple of things you can do, but what you don't do is make a big deal out of it. In fact, one of my cardinal rules for really both public and private ritual is you never make a big deal over having to make an adjustment. And part of the reason I have that is that early in my experiences, I was in a number of rituals, and I'm still occasionally in rituals where the ritual facilitator will encounter an error of some sort and make a big production out of it. And this is not what you do. For one thing, it calls everyone's attention to whatever went wrong, and chances are they missed it. Even something as obvious as invoking the wrong quarter, the quarters know who they are. And chances are the people may have heard the right one, even if the caller said the wrong one. It's best not to make a big deal about it. And if you catch it, all you do is you correct yourself. If you catch any error in ritual, you simply correct it. You don't call attention to it. You certainly don't call attention to it in a way that makes it look worse than it was. I can remember being in a particular ritual, although it seems to me this has happened more than once in my lifetime. But I'm thinking of a particular ritual where the facilitator was doing a ritual that required the casting of the circle in the opposite direction of what would normally be done. And there are certain traditions that do this. There are certain circumstances where you might do this. But when it was time to do it, she went in the normal direction instead of the one she meant to go in. Not in and of itself a big deal, but she stopped in the middle, profusely apologized for her mistake, and then turned around. Now, it so happened there was a reporter present for this ritual who had never been to a ritual before, and this is literally the only part of that ritual that the reporter noticed. What would have been the effective thing to do was to simply complete your circuit in the wrong direction, turn around, and go in the right one. Nobody would necessarily have even caught that you did it. This is how you correct a mistake in a ritual. Simply, without fanfare, and in a way that does not make anyone feel foolish. Um, there's nothing worse than having someone in a ritual who feels that they have been made to look foolish, because they will be totally unable to get any further benefit out of that ritual because their mind will be on whatever their issue was. Um, running a good ritual is like running a good dinner party. You want everyone to feel good about it. And with that, I see that it's time for a word from our sponsors. And here we go.
Ready to unlock the secrets of the universe? Join me, Rev Don Lewis, for my metaphysical and magic auctions at Gaia Thrift at whatnot.com. Discover fascinating artifacts, mystical crystals, and rare and unusual books that could change your life. Don't miss this chance to bring a little magic into your world. Rev Don's Metaphysical and Magic Auctions, where the extraordinary can become yours.
And thank you to Equinox Learning Hub and Rev Don's Metaphysical and Magic Auctions for sponsoring our program. And these are some of my thoughts on how to handle online and public rituals. I hope you found them interesting. And with that, I will see you again tomorrow. And let us close with our prayer as we always do. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for all that you do for us in our lives, and we rejoice in this walk we walk together, and we ask you to help us to always find the most effective ways to do the things we seek to do, whether it's ritual or merely living life. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you with great love, and knowing you are always with us, still from respect, we thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always. May you be blessed now and always.